Paul begins by naming himself and Timothy as the authors. If you trace Paul's life, you see three major stages before he met Christ when he persecuted the church: his conversion as recorded in Acts chapter 9, and his devoted life afterward as an apostle. Timothy, called Paul's son in the faith, had joined him on his second missionary journey, which you can read about in Acts chapter 16. Together, they call themselves servants, literally slaves or douloi of Christ. This shows just how completely they belonged to Jesus. Their identity wasn't their own anymore. It was swallowed up in their master's will. You'll notice the same spirit in James, Peter, Jude, and John as seen in James chapter 1, verse 1, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 1, Jude verse 1, and Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. Paul addresses all the saints in Christ Jesus in Philippi. The word saint means set apart. It doesn't describe someone canonized by a council centuries later. Every Christian, however young or struggling in faith, is a saint, set apart by Christ's blood, as mentioned in Revelation chapter 1, verse 5. Forgiven in baptism, like in Acts 22, verse 16, and dedicated to God's service, as in Romans chapter 6, verse 13. Then he greets the bishops and deacons. This shows the Philippian church was organized as God intended. Elders, also called bishops or pastors, were mature men overseeing the church's work and tending the flock. Deacons served under their direction. Although sometimes churches lack elders, that should never be the long-term norm. Men should train to serve, as outlined in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1. We desperately need more congregations developing strong leaders. Paul's greeting, grace and peace, flows through nearly every letter he wrote. Grace is God's unearned kindness rescuing us from sin through Christ. Peace is the calm of being reconciled to God, as in Romans chapter 5, verse 1. Even when Paul was locked in prison, he still had this peace that passes understanding, as he writes in Philippians chapter 4, verse 7. Paul was a man of constant prayer. He tells the Thessalonians, pray without ceasing, which you'll find in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17. His prayers were filled with gratitude. Here he thanks God for the Philippians' partnership in the gospel. The word fellowship, koinonia, means shared participation. It's not just potlucks and social time, it's standing side by side in spiritual mission. Specifically, Paul remembers their financial support. They sent help again and again, as you can see in Philippians chapter 4, verses 15 through 18. Unlike some congregations, they considered giving not just a duty but a privilege. When you support gospel work, you share in its fruit. Paul is confident that God will complete his good work in them. The word confident, papoithos, shows settled assurance grounded in past experience. God began working in their hearts when Lydia and the jailer heard the gospel, as described in Acts chapter 16. God would continue shaping them until the day of Christ, the final judgment mentioned in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2, and 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10. This doesn't mean Christians can't fall away, but God will never fail to do his part. Our job is to keep obeying, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. Paul says it's right to think this way because he holds them in his heart. They were partners in grace, sharing in his sufferings, defending and confirming the gospel. Defense, apologia, refers to reasoned arguments for the truth. Paul never expected believers to follow blindly. He reasoned, proved, and defended, as seen in Acts chapter 17 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. Confirmation describes establishing believers in the faith, helping them grow firm and unshakable, as in Acts chapter 14, verse 22. That's something every generation needs. Churches don't thrive when believers stay spiritual infants. Paul's longing for them is sincere. He invokes God as witness to his love. The word bowels was an ancient way of describing deep gut-level affection. Paul's heart beat with Christ's love. His prayer, that their love would overflow, but not a shallow, sentimental love. He wants it to abound in knowledge and judgment. Knowledge here, epignosis, means a growing, applied understanding of God's truth. Judgment is discernment, moral clarity to choose what's best. Real love is grounded in truth and produces wise living. He prays they'll approve the excellent, that is, test everything and cling to what matters most. The Christian life is a constant process of sifting the temporary from the eternal. He wants them to be sincere, pure when tested by God's light, and without offense, meaning not causing others to stumble. That integrity should last until the day of Christ. Finally, he prays they'll be filled with the fruits of righteousness. When you yield your life to Christ, your thoughts, words, and actions grow into fruit that glorifies God, as in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 7, and Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. That is the true purpose of life. Though in chains, Paul writes with joy. He wants them to know that his imprisonment has furthered the gospel. The word furtherance means pioneering progress, like an army cutting through the jungle. His bonds had opened doors no one expected. The entire Praetorian Guard, those elite soldiers, and many others had learned he was imprisoned for Christ, not for any crime. Instead of shrinking back, Paul preached to everyone, even Caesar's household. His courage inspired other believers to speak the word boldly. When one Christian stands firm, it strengthens others. Fear is contagious, but so is faith. Yet not all preaching was pure in motive. Some proclaimed Christ out of envy and strife. They resented Paul's influence and wanted to boost their own status. The word contention here suggests selfish ambition, like political rivalry. Still, they preached Christ, not heresy. That's important. Their message was true, but their hearts were wrong. Others preached from love, knowing Paul was appointed to defend the gospel. Their motive was sincere love, for God, for truth, for souls, and for Paul himself. Paul's prayer for the Philippians is also God's desire for us, that our love would overflow in knowledge and discernment, that we would approve what is excellent, that we would be pure and blameless, that we would be filled with righteous fruit. He models a life of courage, gratitude, and unwavering purpose, even in chains. May we learn from Paul's example, standing firm in truth and letting God complete his good work in us until the day of Christ.